Now, this week, the Debt Management Office commenced roadshow on Nigeria's 100 billion naira sovereign sukuk. And we have the company secretary of Lotus Capital, Mr. Masood Balogun, who was part of the roadshow to enlighten us on what actually happened during the roadshow. Thank you so much for coming on the program this evening, Mr. Balogun.
Thank you for having me.
Right. So before we quickly delve into our break, let's hear from you exactly why Nigeria has to float a sukuk when there are several securities options that the government could have tapped into.
Right. The federal government of Nigeria is adopting this option in order to diversify its funding source. So in order to attract new monies and people that were previously not investing in the capital market, in order to give them an instrument for them to invest in. So that's one of the objectives of the federal government. And secondly, because of the nature of the sukuk, which ties funding to a particular project or asset, are in line with the drive of the federal government of Nigeria to increase infrastructural spending. As you say, this sukuk is meant to build road across the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria, so that the funding will be tied to specific projects. That's and also one of the objectives of the federal government is also to promote retail drive. You say the level.
It's going to be more of retail investors eventually.
Both retail and institutional investors can invest in
But
the
exactly
sukuk.
how can the government fund their massive infrastructure deficits with this sukuk?
Okay, so this time around, the federal government is raising 100 billion naira, and this 100 billion naira will be tied to rehabilitation and construction of roads. So when roads are constructed, it will boost economic activities in the country. People can easily move their goods and also services around the country. That will encourage the infrastructural development of the country.
Well, you are not with the DMO, you're with Lotus Capital. I know you are co-financing this, or you're raising capital in collaboration with the DMO on this. But we understand that sovereign sukuk is not a debt. It is instead a strategic debt, or a strategic way of raising capital. It is meant to be an asset-based security. So help us to understand this diversion.
Right. So the sukuk is hybrid, I would say. So equity-based and also debt-based, if you like, because this is lease-based. So when you have an asset and you rent it out to a tenant, then the tenant's obligation towards you constitutes a debt. So in this sukuk, because it is lease-based, the sukuk holders have the asset, which is equity. Then the federal government has rental obligation to pay for the use of the road, which is debt. So it's a hybrid instrument.
Now let's quickly take a look at how competitive this sukuk is going to be, because we know that federal government has got Eurobonds, the federal government has also got treasury bills, the federal government has also got the normal bonds that you find on the Nigerian Stock Exchange as well as the FMDQ. How competitive is this sovereign sukuk going to be with these other securities?
Right, it will be very competitive. The returns are expected to be very attractive. It will be, the DMO has announced that it will benchmark it against a similar tenure FGN security. So currently it's proposed to be 7 years. Currently the 7-year FGN bond security is doing around 16.4%. So the sukuk is expected to mirror that yield curve as well. So it's going to be very attractive. It is also low risk because it represents obligation of the federal government. The federal government will be the lessee of the asset backing the sukuk. So there is no question about whether investors will get their return at the appropriate time. So it's going to be very competitive.
You've been part of the roadshow. What's the sentiment like? How receptive have the investors that you talked about not been participating in the equities market like to this particular security?
Right. I would say the reception has been very good. Okay. We had the first roadshow on Thursday in Lagos. The turnout was very good, notwithstanding the rain. There was also roadshow in Port Harcourt on Friday, and the turnout, the engagement was robust, the appetite was momentous. So the people are actually waiting for the instrument, and we've been getting a lot of inquiries about the opening date and all questions around the issuance generally. So I think the market is waiting for it, both the institutional investors, retail investors, cooperative societies, and all the classes of investors.